The countdown clock on the studio wall blinked red, 2 hours until showtime. I was standing backstage at the biggest product launch of my career, running through my mental checklist for the 10th time. I'd been preparing for this day for over a year. Every feature, every demo, every word of the script had been refined, tested, and rehearsed under my direction. This wasn't just a launch. This was supposed to be my victory lap. The cameras were already being set up. News outlets had taken their seats. Investors filled the front rows, murmuring with anticipation. Tech journalists hovered with their notepads and phones ready, waiting for the story that could define the next decade of our industry. And I was ready for them. Or at least I thought I was. Because just as I adjusted my mic, smoothing the edges of my blazer, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was my boss. He didn't look me in the eye. Instead, he cleared his throat and said flatly, "You're not going on stage." At first, I laughed. I thought he was joking, some sick attempt to ease the tension before the spotlight hit. But then he stepped aside, and behind him stood someone else, a man in a crisp navy suit, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. It was the new VP of Marketing, the CEO's strategic hire. He'd joined the company 6 months earlier, parachuted in with no technical background, but with the kind of charm executives loved. I'd spent those 6 months politely correcting his mistakes, re-explaining features he barely understood, and watching him take up oxygen in meetings I used to lead. And now, apparently, he was taking my place too. "You've done incredible work," my boss said quickly, as if tossing me a consolation prize. "But the board thinks he's a better fit for the spotlight. He's more polished." I stared at him, stunned. More polished. I'd been rehearsing this launch for weeks. Every demo was synced to my voice. Every transition was built around my pacing. My fingerprints were on every inch of this product. Polish didn't matter. Expertise did, but expertise apparently wasn't what they wanted. In 2 hours, my year of work was being handed to someone who barely knew the product beyond the buzzwords. I wasn't even given the dignity of arguing. Security escorted me out of the green room and into a side hallway, as if I were a threat rather than the architect of the entire launch. From there, I watched. On the monitors, I saw him step onto the stage, soaking in applause that wasn't meant for him. He smiled at the cameras, smooth and confident, delivering lines he'd rehearsed just long enough to not trip over. For a moment, I almost believed he might pull it off. But deep down, I knew better. Because the product he was about to demo wasn't just complicated, it was temperamental. It required timing precision and an understanding of its quirks that only I had. And without me, it was a ticking time bomb. 2 hours earlier, they had replaced me. In less than 20 minutes, the world would see exactly why that was the worst decision they could have made. To understand why being replaced hurt so much, you need to know what it was like inside that company. From the outside, it looked like the kind of workplace every ambitious professional dreamed of: sleek glass offices, open concept workspaces, free kombucha on tap, and the buzz of innovation in the air. But beneath the glossy surface was a culture that rewarded appearances more than substance. I had joined the company straight out of grad school, wide-eyed and determined to prove myself. And for years, I did. I was the one pulling all-nighters in the lab, untangling impossible bugs at 2 a.m., and building trust with the engineers who made our vision real. If there was a problem no one else could solve, they came to me. I was dependable, thorough, and, let's be honest, too modest for my own good. Then came the VP. He arrived with fanfare, the kind of executive who had never touched a line of code, but knew exactly how to talk to the board. He dressed sharp, spoke in sound bites, and had a knack for weaving other people's work into his own vision. Within weeks, he was showing up in meetings I had run for years, nodding thoughtfully as I explained my work, only to regurgitate my exact words in the next board session as if they were his. And the worst part, they loved him for it. The CEO practically glowed every time the VP spoke. Finally, someone who knows how to sell this product, he'd say, ignoring the fact that I was the one actually making it work. My team noticed the shift too. At first they laughed about it, rolled their eyes when the VP borrowed my slides, whispered jokes about his buzzword bingo. But slowly the jokes stopped. Because it wasn't funny when the people in power started listening to him more than the people doing the work. I tried to speak up gently at first. That's actually not how the feature functions. I'd correct him in meetings. We need to clarify this before we present it to investors. But every time, I was met with polite smiles or brushed aside with "we'll work out the details later." Don't get stuck in the weeds. The weeds, of course, were where the truth lived. By the time the launch was approaching, it was clear where this was headed. The VP had maneuvered himself into the spotlight, positioning me as the technical lead while he became the face of the product. My boss, ever eager to please the board, went along with it. The message was obvious: brains do the work, but charm gets the glory. I told myself I didn't care about the spotlight, that the product's success mattered more than personal recognition. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. I had poured myself into this launch for over a year, missed holidays, canceled vacations, sacrificed weekends, all because I believed the payoff would be worth it. And now, 2 hours before showtime, I was seeing the truth. In a company like this, hard work wasn't enough. Loyalty wasn't enough. Excellence wasn't enough. The spotlight wasn't something you earned. It was something they handed to whoever looked best under the stage lights. And this time, they handed it to him. The stage lights came up, and with them, the truth of what had just happened to me. From my corner backstage, I watched the VP stride across the platform as if he'd been born for it. He shook hands with the CEO, waved to the crowd, and paused long enough to let the cameras capture his best angle. The audience applauded, their excitement filling the air like static before a storm. This was supposed to be my moment, my words, my product, my blood and sweat. And instead, I was standing in the shadows watching a man who couldn't tell a line of code from a line of poetry pretend to be the genius behind it all. He launched into the opening script, my script. The cadence, the phrasing, even the little pauses I had built in for dramatic effect. I could almost hear my own voice echoing through his, except stripped of sincerity. He sounded polished, yes, but also hollow, like someone reciting lines from a play he didn't understand. And the audience, they didn't notice. At least not at first. They nodded, clapped, leaned forward with interest. Investors smiled and scribbled notes. The CEO beamed from his front row seat, looking like a proud father watching his son's first piano recital. I gripped the edge of a table backstage, forcing myself to stay calm. Rage would have been too easy, humiliation too obvious. What I felt was something colder: anticipation. Because I knew what he didn't. The product wasn't some sleek, push-button demo you could fake your way through. It was temperamental, quirky, full of hidden landmines only someone who lived and breathed it would know how to avoid. That's why I had rehearsed endlessly, building muscle memory around each click, each line of dialogue, each subtle cue. He hadn't. And as the moment came to transition from smooth talking to live demo, I saw the flicker of nerves behind his polished smile. His hands hovered just a second too long over the laptop, his eyes darting at the screen like a man about to step onto thin ice. He had no idea what was coming. Now he announced confidently, "Let me show you how this revolutionary product works." The screen behind him lit up with the interface glowing in bold colors. The crowd murmured in appreciation. For a split second, it looked like he might actually pull it off. But then the lag hit. The product hesitated, spinning, loading, stuttering in a way I had seen countless times in testing. I knew exactly what sequence of clicks and commands would smooth it over. But he didn't. He kept smiling, clicking again, pretending it was part of the show. The silence in the audience stretched thin curiosity, turning into confusion. That's when it dawned on me, as clear as day, they hadn't just replaced me. They had set themselves up for disaster. The VP was walking straight into a trap of his own arrogance, and I was the only one in the building who knew it was about to snap shut. 2 hours earlier, I was humiliated. Now I could feel the tide shifting. The betrayal was still raw, but watching him stumble on stage, unprepared and oblivious, I realized something that almost made me smile. They hadn't stolen my spotlight. They had stolen my time bomb. And it was about to go off in front of the entire world. I didn't plan for this exact moment being shoved aside, hours before launch, but I had planned for the chaos he was now walking into. Because from the very beginning, I knew this product wasn't built for shortcuts. It wasn't a flashy app with a clean demo button. It was a complex, high-stakes system that required patience and finesse. Every feature worked, but only if you handled it with the precision of someone who'd lived inside its code for months. And I had. I knew where the glitches hid, how the interface would lag if you didn't preload certain files, how the live feed would crash if you didn't toggle a setting at the exact right second. I knew the rhythm of it like muscle memory, like a pilot who knows the quirks of her aircraft. That's why my rehearsals were obsessive. Weeks before launch, I spent late nights in the lab running through the demo on loop, documenting every stumble so I could anticipate it next time. I had a handwritten notebook full of scribbled cues when to pause for the processor to catch up, which sequence to trigger, to bypass a bug, what not to click, no matter how tempting it looked. And the VP, he never even opened that notebook. When he first insisted on helping with rehearsals, I tried to show him. I walked him through the steps, patiently explaining that this wasn't a demo you could wing. He smiled, nodded, and brushed me off. "You worry too much," he said, patting my shoulder like I was a nervous intern. "I've done 100 presentations. I'll be fine." That was when I knew. I knew he would never respect the quirks. He only cared about the optics, the stage lights, the applause, the illusion of control. And illusions have cracks if you don't know where to reinforce them. So I stopped trying to convince him. Instead, I doubled down on my own preparation. Quietly in the background, I built safety nets only I could use, backup scripts, hidden commands, even a recovery sequence that required muscle memory to execute. I embedded all of it into my routine, so natural to me it was invisible to an audience. But without me, it was landmines. I didn't do it out of spite, at least not at first. I did it because I cared about the product, because I wanted it to shine, because I knew launches can make or break years of work, and I wasn't about to gamble. But when they pulled me off stage 2 hours before the spotlight, all those precautions, the hours of silent preparation, the detailed knowledge, the reflexes I had carved into my hands, suddenly became something else. They became the line between success and disaster. He thought he could replace me with charm, but charm doesn't fix a frozen interface on live TV. Charm doesn't know which button to avoid or how to buy 5 seconds of buffer time with a well-timed joke. Charm can't save you when the system hangs and the cameras keep rolling. And that's why, standing in the shadows, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was calm, almost serene, because I knew exactly what was coming. And he didn't. The silence in the auditorium was the kind you could feel pressing against your skin. On stage, the VP's grin had started to stiffen, the corners of his mouth twitching as the product stalled in front of hundreds of people and thousands more watching live. Just a small hiccup. He said, his voice pitched too high, fingers jabbing at the keyboard like he could will the system back to life. The audience chuckled politely at first. Tech launches always came with glitches, right? A few seconds of patience wasn't unusual, But then the screen froze completely. The cursor blinked unresponsive. The interface refused to load, and every click he made only dragged the system deeper into chaos. Behind him, the massive projection screen displayed the same spinning wheel of death for the entire world to see. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I watched. This was the exact bug I'd warned him about, the one that only cleared if you ran a hidden sequence of commands I had memorized after months of trial and error. Without that knowledge, there was no way out. The crowd's polite laughter faded into restless murmurs. Cameras zoomed in on his face, catching the sweat beading on his forehead. Investors exchanged uneasy glances. The CEO, seated proudly in the front row, minutes earlier now looked like he was chewing glass. And still, the VP kept going. He tried to pivot, stammering through slides about long-term vision, while the frozen demo screen mocked him in the background. He fumbled through buzzwords, throwing jargon at the audience, like confetti, hoping no one noticed the obvious truth: the product had crashed. The launch, the moment that was supposed to define us, was dead on arrival. Reporters noticed. Oh, did they notice? Phones came up. Tweets flew. Flagship launch demo fails live on stage. Hashtags trended before the VP even limped off the platform. Within minutes, the humiliation wasn't just in the room, it was global. I stood backstage, my hands folded neatly, my face composed. I didn't need to smirk. I didn't need to gloat. The product had spoken for me. Because what none of them understood was this: the crash wasn't sabotage. It wasn't me pulling wires or planting bombs in the code. It was simply the result of arrogance, of thinking you could replace years of sweat and sleepless nights with a smile and a tailored suit. And arrogance always pays in the end. When he finally stumbled off stage, the silence backstage was deafening. No one looked at him. No one congratulated him. Even his usual entourage melted away, leaving him alone with his failure. He caught my eye for half a second, panic, shame, and a flicker of desperation flashing across his face. He wanted me to step in to rescue him, to fix what he had broken. I didn't move. The cameras had already captured everything. The headlines were already being written. And the golden boy who had stolen my moment had just broadcast his incompetence to the world. That was my revenge, not through sabotage, not through shouting, but through silence. By letting his own hubris do the work for me. And in front of millions, it did. The fallout wasn't immediate. That's the thing about public disasters, they ripple. First comes the silence, the awkward attempts to spin. Then the headlines pile up, the investors start calling, and the truth becomes too heavy to hide. By the next morning, the launch wasn't just a stumble. It was a full-blown corporate embarrassment. News outlets replayed the frozen screen on loop, cutting it with clips of the VP stammering, sweating, and drowning in jargon. Memes popped up within hours, side-by-side shots of his confident walk on stage versus his desperate fumble when the system crashed. The internet never forgets, and it never forgives. The company's stock dipped, not catastrophic, but enough to make executives nervous. Investors wanted answers. Customers who had been excited about the product now hesitated. Some canceled orders altogether, unwilling to gamble on a company that couldn't even keep its flagship stable on live television. And the VP, he vanished. Not literally, but close enough. After the debacle, his face disappeared from internal newsletters, from glossy promo decks, from the polished corporate social media posts where he had once been front and center. Whispers circulated in the office he was on personal leave, he was restructuring his role, he was focusing on family. Everyone knew what it really meant. The golden boy had been benched. As for me, something shifted almost immediately. People who had avoided me before, the ones too scared to side with me against him, suddenly started stopping by my desk. "You were the one who really built it, right?" They'd say, their voices low but eager. "We all know what happened. Some even apologized for staying silent. I didn't hold it against them. Corporate survival makes cowards of a lot of good people. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching the VP implode on stage had given me all the closure I needed. My work, my preparation had spoken louder than any revenge I could have planned. The product. Eventually it was salvaged, but only after I was brought back in. Quietly, without a press release, without recognition. They asked me to fix what he broke. I did because I cared about the project, but I did it on my terms this time with clear boundaries. I wasn't going to let them use me as a safety net while someone else stole the spotlight. In the end, I didn't stay at the company. The launch disaster had cracked the facade wide open, and I saw the truth: no amount of talent or preparation could protect you in a culture built on favoritism and ego. So I took what I'd learned, what I'd proven, and I left. A few months later, I was leading product at a startup that valued my voice from day one. Smaller stage maybe, but no one yanked me off it hours before the spotlight. And when we launched, the system ran like a dream. Looking back, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel clarity. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about letting their arrogance destroy them while you walk away stronger, freer, and ready to build something better. And that's exactly what I did.